before?
So
Oh, right. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
um,
Yeah, we went over that. So
yeah, nerve stimulus. Okay. Okay, now he's trying to prove this point. The standpoint of certainty has been decisive. If it had been decisive for designations, how could we still dare to say the stone is hard, as if hard was something otherwise familiar to us and not merely a total subjective stimulation? This is why I thought he was agreeing with Kant, and that like we can't know Mr. Kant, Mr. Kant. I don't know how to say it, but whatever. We can't know um, what the thing itself really is. It's just an impression upon us. That's why I thought he was agreeing with Kant, because I kept seeing all these kind of like everything about nerve stimulus and it just being a subjective stimulation that we can't get
well,
to the truth.
just about Kant, it would be that he believed there was a truth about things, and with reason we could get at it, and that our senses can't really do that. But even then, there's limits to reason. But he still thinks it exists outside of ourselves. That Kant would say it exists, and we might not necessarily access it directly, but it exists. It's real. The truth, that the absolute truth, is real. But Nietzsche's just denying that it exists. Not only fruitless to look for it because we'll never contact it, but
Right,
it doesn't even exist.
right. Which Kant said does, but he communed with it also just for some
Yeah,
basic essentials or something like that, right?
yeah.
Okay.
And so
Um,
Nietzsche's saying that like these designations are really just arbitrary. Like why do we say a snake? I mean, why do we call something a snake?
right,
We just assigned it this arbitrary. That's what he's saying. There's
right.
no reason it had to be snake.
Like genders for in Germanic. I think in German there's genders in
Yeah.
the language. Um, when he says arbitrary, does he mean there's no basis in reality because we don't know if reality even exists? That's what he's claiming.
Oh
There's no
no,
basis.
he doesn't deny reality exists, just that we can't know the truth about it. Like we can
Okay,
make estimates and guesses, but we can never be certain. Like, oh, we can't say that's the absolute truth.
right.
And he's
But
trying to say that your words, you're just putting labels to things with no particular need except preference.
okay. Um, and so I'm trying to reconcile this with my measurement omission understanding of concepts. Like, okay, when I see this, I think, well, the ability of a snake to twist itself is not arbitrary. So we're coming from different, like, obviously, I've been given a completely different context. So I'm trying to understand his view of this being arbitrary, like a snake twisting itself, and therefore,
It's also like a worm. Like, oh, you think
right,
of a snake as twisting, like, oh,
right,
so do worms. Like,
right,
but it's kind of arbitrary. It's just we prefer to put it to a snake or prefer it
right.
to a worm, but it's not like there's any
Okay.
objective difference. And he doesn't see any
Uh,
reason you should prefer. He doesn't have any. He doesn't see any purpose or reason to make that differentiation, other than it's like a preference or a desire, or they just like to do it.
isn't this a bit like the issue in philosophy of we can't define something as simple as a chair or a snake, but you can identify it automatically, but you can't necessarily define it explicitly in conceptual terms. That and
Probably,
that, yeah, okay,
I would say probably because he's saying there's no necessary or reason it has to be this way.
right,
Like you could make any differentiation you want, and that's
right,
what people do.
right,
And that's why there's so many languages, because everybody does that. Everybody's just picking whatever they prefer for the
right,
differentiations, and that's about it. Not like object saying like Rand, where she would say, "Oh, there can be and should be a basis for grounding our perceptions or our concepts in reality." And he's just saying there's no objective fact of the matter. It's just whatever you wanted to assign to Snake, you
yep.
did.
And the I didn't get the reference to the various languages, because languages are the words only, not the concepts, right? Or the symbols only. So what does he mean if we have arbitrary assignments? Is he saying not only is a concept, I mean, I don't, is he just not distinguishing between the word and the concept, or what's the
Probably not.
reference to? Yeah, okay.
I think he treats words as usually like the word is the concept. He doesn't really
Okay.
make a distinction. I don't think he cares to make a distinction. Just
All right.
like our way of thinking is arbitrary. Like that we build up our ideas from concepts, but none of them seem to be based on reality itself.
Uh-huh.
Like it's a construction, an invention.
This was okay. I missed the significance of this. Now that I'm rereading it with you explaining to me that he dislikes Kant,
Yeah.
the thing in itself, which is precisely what the pure truth, apart from any of its consequences, would be, is likewise quite incomprehensible to the creator of language and something not in the least worth striving for. That's interesting. I must have missed the significance of that.
Yeah.
So he's like, there is a thing in itself, but who cares?
Well, he's saying like the thing in itself, or what philosophers call the thing in itself, is actually quite incomprehensible to the creators of language. And it's not worth striving for this alleged thing in itself.
Right,
The
right,
creator is just doing like everybody else. They only designate the relations of things to men. That it's just their kind of designation. It's
right,
not actually what they think it is. It's just
right.
another kind of that, just like everyone else. And he uses metaphors, just like the rest of us.
It does seem like this is a precursor to nominalist theories of concepts being just groupings of resemblances, or in his case, I guess he equates that with metaphor, right? Like that's what he means by
Yes.
metaphor, perceptual metaphor,
Yeah.
the way nerve sensations impact you.
Like first he's saying we get images of things, and that's where we begin our metaphors. Like, oh, we see something,
Right,
we close our eyes, we imagine it. That's we're just
right.
doing metaphorical thinking, he thinks. That we're not finding the objective truth or objective facts, but we're just looking at these metaphors or impressions in our imagination.
But isn't this sort of implicitly buying into Plato's view? He's just saying what you're seeing are metaphors, which are images of the forms, but you can never know the form. I isn't
No,
that
not
if you're
that there's
calling
that the metaphor is your creation though. It's not out there, it's your invention. It's just imagination here. Like he's acknowledging that yes, you are the one that makes this image in your mind and you just decide like what concept do I want to make out of this.
but the nerve stimulus is transferred into an image. That's the first metaphor, nerve stimulus. I'm bringing obviously a completely different context, so this is
True.
why I may be missing it. But the
You're
nerve
right.
stimulus to me is the irreducible and the non-volitional. So if it's the first metaphor, then where is the room for subjectivism, at least in the first metaphor?
Well, first like it's just saying I think that at the beginning it's not any objective truth here. It's just
Right.
you got an image, just like that's just what you see, just when you're using your eyes, and then it becomes a sound. Like he's saying, all we're doing is even in the nerves, it's just making metaphors. It's not
But
that we're communing with some outside truth of existence, but it's just coming subjectively. That it's just each thing is a subjective step.
but if that first metaphor is a nerve stimulus, then in what sense is that free? In what sense is that creativity, as opposed to a simply um, a form of a way of perceiving Plato's forms? It like to me, it just seems like if he's saying that it's a nerve stimulus and the nerve stimulus gives you a metaphor, meaning some kind of image of a reflection of the thing, that's just Plato. And he, except the only
I'll
difference is he's saying you can't commune with the forms.
I'll put it this way: Plato believed the forms existed outside and independent of your consciousness and awareness.
Yes.
It just existed there.
Yeah.
But Nietzsche's not saying it even exists outside your consciousness. It only exists within our consciousness, and our mind creates it. It just
Oh,
creates
okay. So he's saying there's something stimulating you, but
yeah.
he doesn't know what it is.
He's saying you can't know objectively the causal matter of it. You can't know it in the way Rand
Okay.
says she knows. She's making a causal argument. Nietzsche's just really saying that, well, all we have here going on here is just our mind is creating these things even from step one.
Right.
Like he's not saying it's creating reality, but just that our first image within our mind is just something that your mind has created, whether and it's not a fact of the world, but an impression. Well, I don't want to say impression. It's just that there's reality. He definitely agrees that there's reality, but we don't know true facts. We can't know the causal relationship among things. We just invent the relationship ourselves.
But
Like
he
we
does
invent the
think there's a
correlations.
stimulus.
Yeah,
So
I mean, he
it's almost
thinks
something, is that from consciousness? Consciousness is the stimulus or external to consciousness?
just external, just any.
Okay.
You look at the sun. That's all he means. That would be a nerve stimulus. Like your eyes detect it, then your eyes and your mind then builds up the image.
But
Then the
he's
image is
not
turned to a sound.
but he's not saying that because if it otherwise it would be saying that there is, like, to me it would be, the claim would be he's trying to say like your nerve stimulus is from an external reality and it,
No, not an external reality. Just
yeah, okay, yeah.
yeah, just the world.
But the stimulus is from something, right? So,
Yes. I
and
mean, he
but
doesn't
he's just
deny.
saying you don't know what, whether it's from itself, whether it's from consciousness itself, or whether it's from the
No,
external
I
world.
don't.
Is that
Mm, perhaps that's a possibility, actually. But I don't think he's denying that, or even questioning that reality is there. He's just saying, yeah, you know, it's just coming from the world, but you can't say like, are you say the concept snake, and then, or say let's just take table like Rand talks about. So and we see a table and we see the flat surface or whatever. I mean, that's like the first image you could say. Like Nietzsche's saying, you see a table, that's the table. Like you see a table, but then seeing the image isn't any like that's a metaphor in the sense that once you've identified a table, you're talking about how things appear to you. It's a bit confusing when he says image because I'm not sure if he means the within your imagination or your perception. Because it would
right?
make more sense to me if I say within imagination, like we get a nerve impulse and then we can close our eyes and see it, see the thing we're looking at. And
But
all we're doing is making a connection.
but if you're using the term, if he's using the term, I guess this is why the context would be so helpful. But if using the term nerve stimulus, to me, that's determinist and would
A bit.
imply the metaphor is, it's not that we're determined, the metaphor is simply the form of perception. And so that is, the nerve stimulus gives you a certain form of perception. And he's saying, well, we don't know what causes that form of perception, and so it's stupid to talk about. I don't know, this is weird. Like, how is he not buying into a thing in itself if he's using nerve stimulus giving you a first metaphor, at least if you're using nerve stimulus in the sense of a determined impact on your senses?
Um, it's a bit. Yeah, I think there is a problem in his reasoning. I think you're right. There is a problem there in his reasoning. Like he is, he seems to be a little confused whether he's talking about whether it's determined or not. Like it seems like it's hard for him to say where what the metaphor is.
Right.
Like, is it metaphorical, like the snake above? It does seem like he does give into the thing in itself a little bit because he's saying there's an absolute thing about the objects, but we can leave that aside and say that whatever thinking we have is just like the snake above. We're just making an association as we felt like. We just associate things and then associations are built on associations.
Yeah.
and it's all just a bunch of associations all the way up. And
What
like
and what
metaphors, like a snake is like a worm. That's all we have really have, things like that.
what is this initiate? The image in turn is imitated in a sound, a second metaphor. What's that?
I'm not sure.
And each time there is a complete overleaping of one sphere right into the middle of an entirely new and different one.
The way I understand, say the way Rand talks about, like, you got sensation, perception, cognition, or concepts, and Nietzsche's trying to say anything from forming that first concept is a metaphor, and it's not like identifying a relationship or reality. It's just an association that we've made between image and thing in the world. Like the concept is just an association. Even first level concepts are
Okay.
associations.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I think I get what you're saying, and I think I understand this now. So what he's saying is that it's not that. So you've got a form of perception, maybe, but the way you then form the concept is through the first metaphor, is transferred
So.
into an image. So it's like you see the snake, you think of um,
The
the
worm.
worm, and then you forget the differences, but that's still contradictory. But anyway, I think what he's saying so far is, like you pointed out, is that you are making these kind of comparisons to things that are alike but not the same.
Yeah. And the reason I would point that out just because you can see the way Rand's way of thinking is comes out different, even though she says we create our concepts. She's not at no point saying there's any metaphor. She's saying there's a definite relationship a concept can have with reality. They don't need to be metaphors. There is
Right.
a grounding to it, but Nietzsche is like, well, there is no grounding, so therefore everything is just a metaphor.
I get the second bit too now. Is imitated in a sound. Second metaphor. That's the word snake. It
Yeah.
makes the sound of the snake, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's what he
he would say
means.
that, yeah.
Okay.
It's
Cool.
just building up metaphors and just more of that explanation. Yeah, perhaps you will discover the causes in the
Crow, like the
vibration.
crow, right? Second metaphor imitated in the sound, the word. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. I never thought of crow. Caw. Crow.
Yeah, exactly.
I
And
never
that's
thought
what
about
he's
that.
getting at, right? And I think that's what he means, overleaping of one sphere right into the middle of it entirely. So
Yeah.
the image then overleaping into the sphere of the sensation of sound. I think that's what, well, that took us like 10 minutes to get though.
But that's a lot of what he's saying is once you understand that part, I think the rest of it starts to make a lot more sense.
Okay. All right, let's have a look at what. Okay, I didn't get what he said.
It's
In the
saying,
same way that the sound appears as a sand figure, I guess a metaphor, so that can be blown by the wind. So the mysterious X of the thing in itself first appears as a nerve stimulus, then as an image, and finally as a sound. So what's the mysterious X of the thing in itself?
I
This
think
unknown?
imagine somebody saying it sarcastic, like, we have the mysterious X and the thing in itself, and it just first appears as a nerve stimulus, then an image, then a sound. It's like saying, like, oh, you and your big words. It's just like, it's still just a metaphor. Even that's a metaphor, he's saying. See, it's following the same path, like nerve stimulus, image, sound. Same
Wait,
pattern.
say that again. What?
He's still doing the same pattern as before. Image, stimulus, image, sound. Even the mysterious X, like you can say that in a sarcastic tone. The mysterious X
Okay.
first appears as a nerve stimulus, then image, and as a sound.
So
So it's just
even
like the rest.
the insights of philosophers, even they can't escape the nerve stimulus, image, and sound.
Yeah, he's saying all language is that way. Doesn't matter who you are, no
All
matter
right.
how great of a philosopher you are, that's still what you do. That's his
And
claim.
so what here we've okay, I'm getting what he's saying now. So there's a distinction between nerve stimulus, which is the form of perception, at least so far as I've understood it, and then the image he's referring to is actually the process of concept formation, and then the sound is what he calls the word, is what he's referring to, the word, the symbol, but it's represented
Yeah.
in sound. Okay, cool.
Yes.
All right, this makes more sense now. All right, let's further consider concept formation. This was your highlighting. Every word becomes a concept insofar as it is not supposed to serve as a reminder of the unique and entirely individual original experience to which it owes its origin, but rather a word becomes a concept. That's funny. A word becomes a concept as opposed to the opposite, insofar as it simultaneously has to fit countless more or less similar cases. Okay, cool. Purely, which means purely and simply cases which are never equal and thus altogether unequal.
Like no two apples are exactly the same,
Right.
even if they generalize as the concept apple.
Yeah.
And like he even accepts that. Like I don't think anybody would really question that's what that concept does.
Yeah. Every concept arises from the equation of unequal things. It feels like I was wondering if he feels equivocating on equation and equal here, because in one sense, like it depends. This is what makes this, I realize, is why reading philosophy is so hard, because each philosopher will define their own concepts. And so once you get in their web of concepts and you go to read someone else, you're suddenly like, you can become so completely puzzled and baffled.
Yeah.
Because you're not coming from the same context they are. Because look at this, he's saying cases are never equal and altogether unequal, but the equation of unequal things. And so what kind of equation if they're unequal? And clearly he means an equation of the similarities. But so do you know what I'm saying? Like it feels like there's some difference in the way equal is being used here.
Well, a concept would be a generalization in this case. Like just take apples, and it stands for not just a particular specific apple, but really more or less similar cases. Just things
Yes.
that are similar apples, but you're at the same time acknowledging that they are unequal because they are not the same. I mean, if you can't say one equals one, then it's like saying one equals two. It makes no sense. It doesn't.
Right.
It's like you're trying to make an equation that way. When you can't, how do you make an equation relating to unequal things? You don't just say they're equal, but um, so you're saying a concept is dealing with unequal things. You can't just say an apple equals the concept apple because I mean, they're unequal. I mean, not every apple is the same, so
True.
they can't be equal.
True.
And he's
But
kind of rejecting that you really could generalize in a way that you really could talk about concepts in a causal way, even.
But see, what I'm saying is here he's saying it has to fit countless more or less similar instances, and that the only way you can equate an unequal thing is to contradict yourself. So either it does fit countless more or less similar cases, or it doesn't. Sorry, mate, I've got to turn this thing on. Okay, that's done. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
this would be a contradiction, wouldn't it? How can you equate something that is unequal and yet it is fitting countless more or less similar cases, which is a form of it's a form of equating. So I don't really, unless he's saying that is a contradiction and he's trying to point that out.
I'm not sure. I think
Okay.
it's a bit odd here.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
let me ask you this. I originally thought he was equal to him meant the thing in itself. But how does this compare to, because when we read, is it Borges?
Yeah.
We read Borges, remember Funes the Memorious?
Yes.
And he pointed out that to abstract or to generalize is to forget differences. The
Yes.
emphasis was on to forget differences and not to identify essential similarities or similarities. And then, so is implicit in the forgetting of differences the leaving of what's equal, or it's because it seems like it's similar here in that the emphasis isn't simply on forgetting some differences, but then there are still other differences.
just as certain that one leaf is never totally the same as another. So yeah, leaves are identical. So it's certain that the concept leaf is formed by arbitrarily discarding these individual differences. So yeah, I mean, even let's just even take Rand for a second and take her account, like she's saying that you eliminate the individual differences when you're doing abstraction. You're not looking at those individual differences.
Yeah.
Like you abstract, like you don't need the exact shape of a.
Sorry, Louis, do you want to turn off your video and I'll turn off mine? You're getting cut. You keep getting cut off again.
Sure, we can try that.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah,
So
you got cut off. Yeah, you were talking
okay.
about Rand.
So she would be saying that we abstract away the differences, like everybody has a height, but you abstract that away when you think of the concept man. And so
Yeah.
Nietzsche's saying that, but Nietzsche's saying that's arbitrary when we do that, and all we do is we forget those distinguishing aspects. We forget those particular differences. To Nietzsche, that's what abstraction is. You're forgetting the actual distinctions, which would be like Funes. You're forgetting the concrete particulars,
Right.
is what Nietzsche's claiming.
Okay. Um,
Or you forget what makes equal in a way,
or you forget what
makes them
make
unequal.
right. Okay. Just as it is certain that one leaf is never totally. What's up with the leaf? Everyone uses leaves. A leaf is not
I
red
don't
and
know.
green at the same time.
I don't
That's
even know.
interesting. I wonder if did Aristotle write about leaves or something?
I don't even know.
Maybe
If
it's
it's
just a
one of
chance
those
coincidence.
metaphors, just one of those metaphors everybody uses.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, cool. Just as it is certain that one leaf is never totally the same as another, so it is certain that the concept leaf is formed arbitrarily discarding, okay, there we go, arbitrarily, without basis, discarding these individual differences and by forgetting the distinguishing aspects. This awakens the idea that in addition to the leaves, there exists in nature the leaf, the original model according to which all leaves were perhaps woven sketch method measured blah blah blah, but by incompetent hands, so that no specimen is turned. Oh, okay, so this
He's
is
throwing
at
he's throwing
Plato's
shade at
forms.
Plato. He's throwing
Yeah,
shade at Plato. He's not only
yeah,
saying is it bad, he's like it's built like incompetent hands. The thing in
right,
itself is incompetently built. Like he's
right,
really hating on it.
yeah, yeah.
That's what he is.
Uh, so when he
Like you
says
just
arbitrary, does he mean without reason? Because he doesn't believe in reason. So what is
he doesn't
arbitrary?
believe there's any objective reason.
What
Like
would be
Rand would say, oh,
objective?
they're well, like the way Rand uses there's a something about tables they all share a flat surface on the top and that is a valid and objectively valid way of defining table or conceiving of table. Like we're actually relating it to the process of like measuring the table. That's a fact about reality. It's not something we decided. Like when Rand was talking about that, she does take care to say that we form concepts because it's not an arbitrary rule that we're using. We're trying to relate it to like what are the things that you perceive that make you can integrate them on or differentiate them by. And you're saying she would be saying that just the fact of our perception would grant us that information, but Nietzsche would be saying that there is no objective rule to that. It's just, as you said, just metaphor.
But within his framework, what would be like? I understand within Rand's framework,
Yeah,
objective is in
yeah,
relation to sense perception as the base,
yeah.
and it is a relationship between a reasoning mind and reality is conveyed through sense perception. But then within his framework, what would objective even be if there's just a nerve stimulus and you don't know what it is or where it comes from?
Well, first part that's difficult is he doesn't believe in objective because Rand came up with that sense of objective that she uses. So to him, objective means Kantian. So there's no
Oh,
objective
okay.
answer.
Right.
Therefore, there is no other answer. Like he didn't come up with the idea Rand had. So like he
Okay.
either had objective or you don't. It
Right.
was like not objective. So therefore arbitrary.
Without basis.
Yeah, with and Nietzsche does believe in reason. He just doesn't believe it has the value that Kant says. Like it has its uses, but it's also not any more important than anything else. It's not more important than emotion or anything. It's just like there's no like emotion is just as valid for cognition as is your reason. He doesn't make a distinction really.
Okay. What? And the other thing is, when he talks about, I am noticing, even in Borges, right, there was this emphasis on the forgetting of differences,
Yes.
and that, but there's not really much discussion on the distinguishing aspects in terms of similarity. There's differences,
No.
but there's not much discussion of similarity in both of them. Is
Yeah, I
that
think it's probably indicative of why they come up with a different place as Rand. That
right? Okay.
they don't think about integration. They think about differentiation, sure,
Okay.
but they're not thinking about integration, which
Right.
is the interesting thing. They just take it for granted. It's like, well, you should stuff things together. Arbitrary. They don't have any objective answer to what integration is.
Okay. We call a person honest and then ask, why has he behaved so honestly today? Our usual answer is on account of his honesty. That reminds me of Socrates'
Yeah,
discussions
yeah.
in Euthyphro and the trial. Anyway, honesty. This in turn means that the leaf is the cause of the leaves. I didn't get I thought honesty to him was the desire to avoid war of all against all. That's where I got confused. Like, so why is he
Uh,
now saying,
he's just pointing out circular reasoning. That's all. To say you're honest because he's honest. Like that's meaningless. Just as much like the leaf is a leaf because it's a leaf. Like why is it a leaf? Because it's a leaf. How do you know it's a leaf? Because it's just circular.
oh, okay,
He's saying like it also be like saying that we he denies that there's even an essential quality called
right,
honesty. All we know is individual unequal actions. Like you're not saying like, well, there's this kind of honest action and this kind of honest action. It's like, no, there's just individual actions, which is a bit concrete bound. Like he's saying,
doesn't
oh,
this
there's just concretes.
doesn't
Basically.
this hark back to Socrates? Like, we know nothing whatsoever about an essential quality called honesty, which was in in the early dialogues. That's what he's trying to do through definition, is identify an essential quality. And I'm surprised that even then, whenever he wrote this in the 1800s, there was no identification of an essential quality called honesty.
It was like 1874, I think, when he wrote this.
Right.
But yeah, he might even be thinking of Socrates when he wrote that because he was a
Yeah.
philologist and he studied the Greeks like a lot. So Socrates and Plato and Aristotle. So he knows that stuff.
What's a philologist?
They usually studied like the classics and they translated Greek literature
Oh,
and Latin literature just as like literary analysis, but sort
okay.
of like an anthropologist or a professor of literature.
All right. Um, well, we do know of countless individualized and consequently unequal actions which we equate by omitting the aspects in which they are unequal and which we now designate as honest actions. So there he goes again with the emphasis on the omitting the differences, which is Borges's forgetting differences but not
Yes.
identification of similarity. All
Yeah.
right. Finally, we formulate them a qualities occulta. I didn't even look that up. I don't know what that is, which has the name honesty.
Yeah. So you forget the thing, you give it a name. That's all he's really saying.
All right. So that's the second metaphor. Anyway, we obtain the concept as we do the form by overlooking what is individual and actual. Okay, that's what he said before.
Yeah.
Whereas nature is acquainted with no forms and no concepts. Okay, arbitrary human creation.
Yeah.
And likewise with no species, but only with an X, which remains inaccessible and undefinable for us.
Yeah.
But see, that's where I thought he does agree with Kant, because he keeps talking about this X, the thing in itself. So he does buy into that conception of this inaccessible thing in itself outside of us.
Because I think he's saying there is no such thing as an essential. So it's inaccessible. Well, I know what you mean. Like, I think it's more the assertion that such a thing exists would always be accessible and undefinable. It's no good. It can't even access.
Sorry, Louis, you're breaking up.
I think the only thing that there is about the essential is it an inaccessible and undefinable thing.
But what I'm saying is that by saying this, isn't he on Kant's premise that there is something in and of itself which is inaccessible and undefinable for us? The only difference being that Kant says he could access part of it, maybe, and Nietzsche saying, well, you can't access any of it, so you just don't know. But isn't that still on Kant's premise that there is the thing in itself outside of consciousness which we can't access? This bit, because it's the only X, but only with an X which remains inaccessible. Because
I think that's before. Yeah, I think it's a bit hard to describe. I'm not sure how to phrase that without making it really convoluted. All I'll say, just he might be ironic here, and that's kind of frustrating about Nietzsche sometimes. Like, sometimes I do get frustrated when he's like, "Are you being ironic? Or are you being serious?" Like, I don't know if he meant that like they really are inaccessible and definable, and therefore exist.
Oh, okay.
Like, it's just eye rolling there.
Okay. I understand. All right, cool. All right, well, I'm not sure, but we can keep reading on. For even our contrast between individual and species is something anthropomorphic.
Human-like.
Yeah. Does not originate in the essence of things because they're inaccessible and undefinable for us. I think he's being serious. I think he is buying into there is this X which remains inaccessible and undefining. Otherwise, why is he going on about for even our contrast between individuals is anthropomorphic? Or it's all anthropomorphic coming from a nerve stimulus, which we don't there. Oh, I don't know actually. I'm not sure. Anyway.
I think it's inaccessible because there is no such thing, rather than it's inaccessible because it exists, but we can't get to it. I think it's going on about like, well, it's inaccessible, but it just doesn't, there's nothing to access. There is no essence. And this truth doesn't originate in the essence. That's not even what we care about. There is no essence. I presume that there is.
And so I mean, I can see how you'd come to if it's a nerve stimulus and you don't know, it's strange to think there's a nerve stimulus, but you don't know you're just saying, who knows? And so now everything is arbitrary and there's no essentials. We just define it according to whatever we feel like. In the essence of things, although we should not presume to claim that this contrast does not correspond.
Yeah, I'm a bit unsure actually about that part.
I don't know about this one.
Yeah, I'll keep going. I don't know. That one's a bit weird.
Is this okay.
It's hard because he changed his way of thinking over time. He may have been leaning towards Kant a little bit then, like making fun of him, but also accepting a little bit. But 5 years later, he's like, it's on Kant regularly.
Okay.
So it's more his development as a thinker. Like, unlike Rand, Nietzsche tends to write even before he's reached certainty. Like, so you find him changing his mind.
Right. All right. Now he's saying we don't know where the drive for truth comes from, which to me was, well, didn't we just say that the drive from truth was to prevent the war of all against all? And now he's saying we don't know. This is why I was got confused. I'm like, what? Why is he now saying we don't know?
Hold on, I marked something on mine.
Well, he does say, for so far we have heard only of the duty, which is, so
Yeah.
maybe he was saying that was one reason. I don't really know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, we don't know. Like, even we've heard of something, but it's like, it's not really the drive to truth.
But, okay, I get he's saying, but he's saying, okay, he's talking about the duty to lie according to fixed convention. But why is he saying we still don't know yet where the drive for truth comes from? Isn't that what he said? That this is, that it's a way to bind us to the herd in a cooperative way?
Truth comes from. I'm not sure if he was saying was the drive to truth, but I'm not sure. Yeah, for some. Yeah, I don't know why he says that. It does seem like he's answering it, or he's continuing the answer rather. He just took a detour to talk about metaphors. Now,
What do you think of this bit? Is there any accuracy? It's a bit of a stretch, but is there any accuracy in any of observations he's making in terms of people just learn words and concepts by means of unconsciousness, meaning without thinking much, by taking over the concepts from others?
well, he means unconsciously here, but in terms, it's like kind of what Rand would mean, like unthinking, not that you're literally unconscious, but that you're just operating by habit, by drift. And that's what Nietzsche is talking about. And yeah, translation might use a different word. Unconscious is not the only way you probably could translate it. So it's just non-thinking habit, this drifting.
Do you know what he means by moral impulse? What's his view of, like, what's the term for him? Just so I understand his concept of what is a moral impulse, or what is even morality in his view.
I think he's just identifying that when people say like, "Oh, you should be good," like the impulse, wherever it comes from, just to be good. For the system,
All right.
we're saying it's an impulse to truth by osmosis in a way.
He talks about as a rational being, one in hoc to reason and the conventions of concepts. His behavior is under the control of abstractions.
Yeah, it's like he's being
Okay.
under control of these constructions built by other people that
Yeah.
they're controlling us, that their morality is controlling you.
Right.
But this is an interesting observation he has here in this part I highlighted. What distinguishes man from the animals? The ability to volatilize perceptual metaphors in a schema.
What the hell? Please break down. What is volatilize in a perceptual
Well, I
metaphor in a
guess
scheme?
to make volatile, to make messy, to make fiery, I guess we could say, like chaotic. To make perceptual metaphors, like fill it with energy and chaos and whatever else meaning we want to put into it. I
What's a
guess like
schema?
a structure, a skeleton, like a structure.
Okay.
Like think of a script is more like it, but you like assemble the pieces all together.
Yeah.
Like a
Okay.
schema could be like the way we've made those reductions to perception. You could say that's a schema.
To dissolve an image into a concept. What that's interesting use of.
Yeah, that is interesting. Like, it's in a way saying like it's not a concept itself is not an image. I think is what he's claiming. Like the image
Okay.
dissolves and you have just the concept. Like if I say honesty, like just the word and the associated meaning would be like there's no image anymore. He's saying it gets
Uh,
which I don't know if it's true, but it's an interesting thought.
all right, let's keep reading. Um, Actually, we should probably wrap up soon, hey? Because of
Yeah. Well, this part's actually I can go through this part quick because this is
okay.
just saying, well, but these schema we can create all these sorts of things. We can um we can't make these well. Something is possible in this schemata that could never be achieved by first impressions. New world of languages, coordination, a new world.
I will have a lot of questions about this. So I am happy just let's do this and then I will